The champagne flute in my hand remained steady as mocking laughter filled the plaza. My husband, Julian, and his arrogant boss had just branded me a useless burden to New York's elite, but neither they nor the 500 guests knew a tiny detail. The corporation they were celebrating, this very building, and their entire futures actually belonged to me. Tonight, I did not come to toast their success. I came to burn it all down. My name is Alessandra Vale, and for the last 10 years, I have perfected the art of being invisible, standing in the shadowed periphery of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. I watched the golden light of the chandeliers fracture against the diamond necklaces of Manhattan's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume, stale ambition, and the metallic tang of chilled Osetra caviar. It was a scent I knew better than anyone in this room. A scent I had been born into, but for the past decade, I had washed it off my skin every night to play the role of the devoted. Simple wife, my husband, Julian Thorne, stood in the center of the room, bathing in the adulation of 500 guests. He looked every inch the conqueror. His tuxedo was bespoke, cut to flatter the broad shoulders he had developed not through labor, but through overpriced personal training sessions at Equinox. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand and the shoulder of a minor senator in the other. Laughing his deep, practiced laugh that I used to think was charming but now recognized as a networking tool. Tonight was his coronation. At 35 years old, Julian had just been named the Global Strategy Director of Ethelgard Holdings. To the uninitiated, Ethelgard was just another conglomerate. To the people in this room, it was the titan of biotechnology and renewable energy, a company with a valuation that hovered in the hundreds of billions. Julian believed he had clawed his way to this summit through sheer brilliance and grit. He believed his strategic memos on emerging markets were works of art. He had no idea that the only reason his resume had even bypassed the initial screening algorithms 5 years ago was because I had made a single, untraceable phone call. I took a sip of my champagne. It was lukewarm, fitting. I thought, everything about this evening was lukewarm beneath the glittering surface. My mind drifted back to 7 o'clock this morning in our master bedroom. The memory was sharp, a jagged piece of glass I was currently turning over in my hand. I had been standing in front of the vanity, holding this very dress against my body. It was an emerald green silk gown, cut on the bias, designed to flow like liquid water. There were no labels, no flashy logos, no sequins screaming for attention. It was a custom commission from a reclusive couturier in Paris. A woman who only sewed for 3 families in the world. The silk alone cost more than Julian's car. Julian had walked in, knotting his tie, and stopped. He had looked me up and down, his lip curling in that subtle, disappointed way that had slowly eroded my self-esteem over the last 3 years. "Alessandra," he had sighed, checking his watch. "Is that what you are wearing?" "I thought it was elegant," I had replied, my voice soft. "It matches your eyes." "It looks old," he had said, turning back to the mirror to admire his own jawline. "It looks like something a librarian would wear to a funeral." "Honey, tonight is about power. It is about arrival. I need you to look like the wife of a global strategy director, not a woman who spends her days repotting hydrangeas." He had walked over, kissed me on the forehead, a dry, patronizing peck, and whispered, "Just try not to embarrass me. Okay, stay in the background. Don't try to talk business with Marcus. Just smile and look pretty. Or, well, try to." I had worn the dress anyway, not out of defiance, but because I knew something Julian did not. True power does not need to scream. True power whispers, and the world leans in to listen. Now, hours later, I stood in that background he had relegated me to. I watched the crowd part as a man made his way toward the stage. Marcus Sterling, the chief executive officer of Ethelgard Holdings. If Julian was a practiced imitation of power, Marcus was a caricature of it. He was a man in his late 50s with silver hair coiffed to aerodynamic perfection and a smile that displayed $10,000 worth of dental veneers. He wore a suit that cost more than the average American made in a year. Yet he wore it with the desperate energy of a man who knew he was merely a steward, a placeholder. Marcus stepped up to the podium. He tapped the microphone, the feedback whining briefly before settling into a hum. The room went silent. These were sharks, and they knew when the alpha was speaking, or rather, the man they thought was the alpha. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and the Ethelgard family," Marcus began, his voice booming with a rich baritone timbre that he likely practiced in the shower. "We are here tonight to celebrate the future, and looking around this room, I see the future is bright." He gestured grandly toward the table where Julian sat. "We are here to honor a man who has shown us what relentless drive looks like, Julian Thorne." Applause rippled through the room. Polite, enthusiastic, calculated. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket, nodding with humble arrogance. "Julian has been with us for 5 years," Marcus continued, leaning over the podium. "In that time, he has revolutionized our approach to the Southeast Asian markets. He spearheaded the acquisition of the Kinetic Solar Group. He has increased our quarterly projections by 42%. The applause grew louder. Julian beamed. He looked like a golden god. "But," Marcus said, holding up a hand to quiet the room. His eyes twinkled with a malicious mirth I recognized instantly. It was the look of a bully about to pull a chair out from under a victim. "We all know that a man's success is not just about what he does in the boardroom. It is about the support system he has at home." My stomach tightened. I knew this tone. It was the setup. "Most of us," Marcus chuckled, looking around at the other executives, "are lucky to have partners who understand the grind, partners who sharpen our iron, partners who are, shall we say, intellectual equals." A few chuckles from the front row. "But Julian," Marcus sighed, shaking his head with mock sympathy, "Julian is a special case. He has achieved all of this, broken all these records, climbed to the very top of the corporate ladder while carrying a significant amount of dead weight." The room went deadly quiet for a second. Then a few nervous titters broke out. Marcus grinned, emboldened. "I mean, let us be honest," Marcus said, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the room where I stood. "We have all met the lovely Alessandra, sweet girl, charming, knows a great deal about, what is it? Julian Dahlia's petunias. Laughter, open, cruel laughter. It takes a strong man to run a billion-dollar division by day and go home to explain the world in single syllables by night," Marcus roared, clearly enjoying his own wit. "To Julian Thorne, the man who succeeded in spite of his useless wife." I felt the blood drain from my face, not from shame, but from a cold, crystallizing rage. I looked at Julian. This was the moment. This was the test. A husband, a partner, a man who claimed to love me, would stand up. He would walk to that stage, take the microphone, and demand respect for the woman who had nursed him through the flu, who had managed his life, who had loved him when he was a nobody. Julian stood up. He walked up the stairs to the stage. He shook Marcus's hand, pulling him into a bro hug. Then, Julian Thorne took the microphone. He looked out at the audience, his eyes scanning the room until they found me in the shadows. For a brief second, I saw hesitation, but then, the spotlight hit him, and the adoration of the crowd washed over him, and he made his choice. "Marcus is right," Julian said, his voice smooth, amplified through the speakers. "We all have our crosses to bear." The crowd erupted. "You know," Julian continued, leaning casually against the podium, "people ask me how I maintain my focus, and I tell them, when you have a rock tied to your ankle, you have to swim twice as hard just to stay afloat. My career is proof of what a man can do, even when he is being dragged down by an anchor." He laughed. It was a cruel, performative sound. "But hey, she keeps the house clean, right?" The explosion of laughter was physical. It hit me like a wave of heat. 500 of the wealthiest, most educated people in New York were throwing their heads back, cackling at my expense, They looked at me with pity, with disdain, with the superior sneer of wolves looking at a wounded rabbit. I saw the wife of the CFO leaning into her neighbor, whispering behind a manicured hand, her eyes locked on my dress. I saw the waiters looking away, embarrassed for me. I stood there, frozen. The champagne glass in my hand felt heavy. Julian was still smiling on stage, basking in the camaraderie of his peers. He felt safe. He felt powerful. He felt like he was part of the club. He had no idea that he had just signed his own death warrant. Slowly, deliberately. I placed the champagne flute on the tray of a passing waiter. He looked at me, startled by the sudden movement. "Thank you," I whispered. I smoothed the front of my emerald silk dress, the dress Julian had called old, the dress that was actually a vintage archival piece from the 1990s, worth more than the down payment on our first apartment. I lifted my chin. I did not cry. Tears were for people who were helpless. Tears were for victims. I was neither. I stepped out of the shadows. Click. My right heel struck the marble floor. The sound was sharp, distinct, cutting through the lingering laughter like a gunshot. Click. I began to walk. The path to the stage was long, running right down the center of the ballroom. As I moved, the guests nearest to me stopped laughing. They turned, confused by the sudden motion, by the solitary figure moving with such terrifying purpose. Click, click, click. My pace was steady. I did not rush. I walked with the rhythm of a pendulum, the inevitable swing of time running out. "Who is that?" I heard a woman whisper. "It is the wife," a man replied, his voice dropping. "Security should really handle this," someone else muttered. "She looks unstable." I kept my eyes locked on the stage. Julian saw me when I was about 20 feet away. The smile on his face faltered. He blinked, confused. He expected me to be running out the side door in tears. He expected me to be hiding in the bathroom. He did not expect me to be walking toward him. Marcus noticed the shift in Julian's demeanor and turned around. When he saw me, his expression went from amused to annoyed. He tapped his watch, signaling that my time was up, that I was interrupting the important people. I did not stop. I reached the base of the stairs. The security guard, a burly man named Frank, whom I had greeted by name at 3 previous galas, stepped forward to block me. He put a hand out. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, "I think it is best if you—" I stopped and looked at him. I did not scream. I did not plead. I simply raised my eyes and looked at him with the full weight of my heritage, the genetic authority of a family that had built railroads and commanded armies of industry for a century. "Move, Frank," I said. It was not a request. Frank froze. He had seen wealthy women throw tantrums. He had seen drunk wives make scenes. He had never seen this. He saw something in my eyes that made his instinct for self-preservation kick in. He stepped back, lowering his head. I climbed the stairs. 1, 2, 3. I was on the stage now. The lights were blindingly bright. The heat from the spotlights was intense. Julian looked at me, his face pale beneath his tan. "Alessandra," he hissed, covering the microphone with his hand. "What the hell are you doing? Get down! You are humiliating yourself." "Am I?" I asked, my voice calm. Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with irritation. "Now look here, young lady," he began, using the tone one uses for a disobedient child. "We are in the middle of a corporate proceeding. If you want to have a domestic dispute, take it to the parking lot." I ignored him. I reached out and took the microphone from Julian's hand. He was so shocked that he let it go without a fight. I turned to face the room. 500 faces stared back at me. I saw the mockery fading, replaced by a tense curiosity. They were waiting for the breakdown. They were waiting for the screaming wife, the tears, the messy public divorce that they could gossip about over brunch tomorrow. I adjusted the microphone stand. It was set too high, tailored for men who thought they were giants. I lowered it until it was perfect for me. I took a breath. The air tasted different up here. It tasted like ozone and electricity. I looked at Julian. He was staring at me with a mixture of anger and fear. He looked at my dress, really looked at it for the first time, and I saw a flicker of confusion. Under these lights, the quality of the silk was undeniable. The way it caught the light, the way it draped it was regal. It did not look like the dress of a gardener. It looked like the robes of a judge. I turned back to the crowd. I let the silence stretch. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. When I finally spoke, my voice did not shake. It was clear, resonant, and cold as the bottom of the Atlantic. "That was quite a speech," I said. The room did not just go quiet. It went dead. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a car crash, that split second between the impact and the scream, where the brain is frantically trying to process a new, horrific reality. 500 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I could feel the weight of their gaze, heavy and suffocating, but I did not buckle. I stood taller. Marcus Sterling was the first to recover his motor functions. His face, previously flushed with the high of his own wit, now darkened with the irritation of a man whose expensive party was being ruined by the help. He stepped toward me, his hand reaching out to snatch the microphone from my grip. "Give me that," he hissed, his voice low enough that only Julian and I could hear it. "You are drunk, Alessandra. You are embarrassing your husband. Security." He raised his voice on the last word, signaling Frank at the bottom of the stairs. I turned my head slowly and locked eyes with Marcus. I did not pull the microphone away. I simply held his gaze with a look of such absolute, freezing indifference that he faltered. His hand hovered in the air, inches from my wrist, but he did not touch me. Instinct is a powerful thing. Even a dog knows not to bite a wolf, and somewhere deep in his reptile brain, Marcus realized he was standing next to a predator. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was amplified by the sound system, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "And do not call security, Marcus, unless you want them to escort you out." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. I saw the senator in the front row lean forward, his eyes narrowing. He was a smart man. He sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure before anyone else. Julian, meanwhile, was paralyzed. He looked at me, then at the crowd, then back at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. He was trying to calculate the damage to his reputation in real time. He laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound that cracked in the middle. "Honey," he said, stepping between Marcus and me, putting on his best reasonable husband face. Okay, you are upset. I get it. The joke was in poor taste. We will talk about it at home. Just give me the mic, and we can go." I looked at him. My husband. The man I had shared a bed with for 10 years. The man who had just told the world I was an anchor around his ankle. I reached out with my free hand. Julian flinched, expecting a slap. Instead, I gently took hold of his lapel. I smoothed the fabric of his tuxedo jacket. I adjusted his bow tie, which had gone slightly crooked during his enthusiastic self-congratulation. It was a gesture of intimacy, of possession. It was something a mother does to a child before sending them off to school. "You look handsome, Julian," I said into the microphone. "You always do. That is what I liked about you when we met. You looked the part." I released him and turned back to the audience. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the faces that had been laughing at me 30 seconds ago. "My husband," I began, my voice steady and conversational, "agrees with Mr. Sterling. He says he succeeded in spite of me. He says I am a rock, a weight, a simple woman who does not understand the complexities of his world." I paused. I let the words hang there. It is an interesting narrative, the self-made man, the hero who overcomes the burden of a domestic life to conquer the corporate world. It is a story you all love. That is why you laughed. It validates you. I walked back toward Marcus, who was now vibrating with rage. "But there is a flaw in your logic." "Marcus," I said, turning to face him, "you called me useless. You said Julian drags me along." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. You seem to be laboring under a significant misunderstanding regarding who, exactly, is dragging whom. Marcus scoffed. This is absurd. Cut the sound, he shouted toward the tech booth at the back of the room. Cut her mic. Nothing happened. The microphone remained live. The audio engineer, a man named David, who had worked for this company for 20 years and whose daughter's college tuition I had quietly paid for through an anonymous grant last year, sat with his arms crossed, staring at the stage. David isn't going to help you. Marcus, I said softly. Julian grabbed my arm. Alessandra, stop, please. You are destroying my career. I pulled my arm away, sharp and hard. Your career? I asked. Julian, you do not have a career. You have a job, and you only have that job because I allowed it. What are you talking about? He whispered, fear finally starting to bleed through his confusion. I turned back to the crowd. It was time. My name, I announced, my voice ringing out like a bell, is Alessandra. You know me as Alessandra Thorne, but that is not my name, not really. I took a deep breath. The air in the room seemed to vanish. My mother was a Thorne, that is true, but my father was Edward Ethelgard. The gasp that went through the room was physical. It started in the front row and swept backward like a shockwave. Chairs scraped against the floor as people shifted. The senator stood up. Ethelgard. It was not just a name. In this industry, it was royalty. It was the name on the building. It was the name on the patent for the synthetic enzyme that had cured 3 types of lymphoma. It was the name on the paycheck of every single person in this room. Impossible, Marcus sputtered. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. Edward Ethelgard had 1 son. He died in a skiing accident in 1998. There are no other heirs. The trust is managed by the board. Edward had a daughter, I corrected him. She ran away when she was 18 because she hated this world. She hated people like you, Marcus. She married a mechanic named Thorne and lived a quiet life until she died. I am her daughter. I am the granddaughter of the founder. And I am the sole beneficiary of the Ethelgard family trust. Liar, Julian shouted. He was panicking now, his face slick with sweat. She is lying. She is a painter. She grew up in Ohio. Her parents were nobodies. I am a painter, I agreed. And I did grow up in Ohio. That is where my mother hid me to keep me safe from the vultures. But when I turned 25, the trust activated. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. Behind me, the massive LED screen that had been displaying a heroic portrait of Julian flickered. The image vanished. In its place, a document appeared. It was a digital scan of a shareholding certificate. It was dense with legal jargon, but 3 things were magnified large enough for people in the back of the room to read. The name Alessandra Ethelgard Vale. The entity Ethelgard Holdings. The stake 65% of Class A voting shares. I own the majority stake in this company, I said, pointing at the screen without looking at it. I own the patent portfolio. I own the real estate division. I own the subsidiary that manufactures the microchips in your phones. And I own the building we are standing in right now. I turned to Marcus. He was no longer red. He was the color of old ash. He stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He knew the laws of corporate governance. He knew what 65% meant. It meant absolute, dictatorial control. It meant he was not the CEO. He was a temp. I have spent the last 10 years watching, I said, walking slowly toward him. I wanted to see if the company my grandfather built was in good hands. I wanted to believe that the men running it were honorable. I stopped inches from his face. I sat at your dinner parties. Marcus, I listened to you brag about cutting safety protocols to boost the quarterly dividend. I listened to you laugh about laying off 4,000 workers in Detroit just to buy a new yacht. And tonight, I listened to you humiliate the woman you thought was powerless. Mrs. Vale, Marcus stammered. His voice was a squeak. Mrs. Vale, please, it was a joke, a roast. It is tradition. I had no idea. You are fired, I said. The words were simple, uncomplicated. What? Marcus blinked. You are fired, I repeated. Effective immediately. Your access to the building is revoked. Your company car is waiting outside to take you home, not to the office. Your golden parachute. That severance package you structured for yourself, I had my lawyers review it this morning. It contains a morality clause. Publicly disparaging the majority shareholder is a violation of that clause. You get nothing. Marcus looked like he had been shot. You cannot do that. The board. I am the board. I cut him off. Get out of my sight. Marcus looked around for support. But the sharks smelled blood. The senator looked away. The other executives studied their shoes. No one was going to stand between the owner and her wrath. Marcus Sterling, the man who had commanded the room 5 minutes ago, slumped his shoulders. He looked small. He turned and walked down the stairs, his footsteps heavy and defeated. No one looked at him. Now, it was just Julian and me on the stage. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was terrified. Julian looked at the screen, then at me. His brain was finally catching up. The dress, the old dress, the confidence, the way I never worried about bills even when his bonus was late. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that terrified him. Alessandra, he whispered. He reached out a hand, trembling. Baby, why didn't you tell me we are rich? We own all of this. He smiled. It was a grotesque, hopeful thing. He actually thought this was a win. He thought he had just won the lottery. I asked. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, dark and amused. Oh, Julian, there is no we in Ethelgard. I stepped closer to him. You wanted to be a big man. Julian, you wanted to be the provider, the hero. You despised me because you thought I was weak. You thought I was riding your coattails. I was joking, he cried, his voice cracking. It was just a speech. Everyone does it. I love you. Alessandra, I did this for us. You did it for yourself, I said cold and hard. You did it because you are small. And making me smaller made you feel big. I glanced at the screen again. The image changed. Now it showed an employment contract. Julian's employment contract. I am not going to fire you, Julian, I said. He let out a breath, his shoulders sagging in relief. Thank God. Okay. We can work this out. I can help you run things. I know the strategy. I am the director of... You were the director, I corrected. But as of tomorrow morning, your position has been reallocated. I pointed to a highlighted section on the screen. I have reviewed your contract, Julian, specifically, the clause regarding reassignment of duties at the discretion of the ownership. It seems you are legally obligated to fulfill any role the company deems necessary for a period of 5 years, or else you forfeit your non-compete and owe a breach penalty. I smiled at him. We have an opening in the archives department, I said. It is in the sub-basement of our logistics facility in New Jersey. It involves manual data entry, scanning invoices from 1982, 8 hours a day, no windows, minimum wage. Julian stared at me. You are joking. I never joke about business, I said. You start at 9 in the morning tomorrow. Do not be late. The commute is brutal. I quit, he spat, his face twisting into ugly anger. I quit. You think I will work in a basement? I am a director. I will walk out of here right now and get a job at Kinetic or Blue Star. Read paragraph 4, section C, I said calmly. The screen zoomed in. In the event of voluntary termination prior to the completion of the 5-year term, the employee agrees to pay a liquidation damage fee of $5 million to compensate for training and proprietary knowledge. $5 million, I said. Do you have $5 million? Julian, I know you don't. I know exactly how much is in our joint account. I know about your credit card debt. I know about the lease on that Porsche you cannot really afford. Julian turned the color of chalk. If you walk out that door, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "I will sue you for breach of contract. I will garnish your wages for the rest of your life. I will take the Porsche. I will take the watch on your wrist. I will take the shoes off your feet." I leaned in close, until my lips were inches from his ear. "So, you have a choice. You can go to New Jersey tomorrow and scan paper clips for $12 an hour. Or you can become destitute. Which is it going to be, Mr. Strategy Director?" Julian stood there, his mouth open, his eyes hollow. He looked at the crowd, but there was no help there. He was alone. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and I held the key. I did not wait for an answer. The look of total, crushing defeat on his face was answer enough. I took the microphone from the stand and held it for a moment. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said to the room. "The bar is open. Put it on my tab." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that made everyone jump. I turned and walked down the stairs. I did not look back at Julian. I did not look at the stunned faces of the guests. I walked down the center aisle. The emerald silk of my dress flowing around me like armor. The sea of people parted for me, terrifyingly fast. They stepped back, giving me a wide berth, looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I walked out of the ballroom, through the gilded doors, and into the cool air of the lobby. Behind me, the silence finally broke, replaced by the chaotic roar of 500 people trying to understand what they had just witnessed. I did not care. I signaled the valet. It was time to go home, but not the home I shared with Julian. That life was over. The real game had just begun. The valet brought my car around, but it was not the sensible sedan Julian thought I drove. It was a phantom black coupe with an engine that purred like a contained storm. A vehicle I had kept garaged in a private facility 3 blocks from the Plaza. I slipped behind the wheel, the leather cool against my skin, and drove away from the chaos I had ignited. I did not go back to the sterile, beige colonial in the suburbs that I shared with Julian. That house was a set piece, a stage for a play that had finally finished its run. Instead, I drove north, toward the Hudson Valley, to a gated estate that did not exist on any public record associated with the name Thorne. This was my sanctuary, a sprawling modernist structure of glass and stone hidden deep within 50 acres of forest. I had bought it 4 years ago using a shell company when the walls of my double life had started to feel like they were closing in. My phone sat on the passenger seat, lighting up the dark interior of the car with a rhythmic, epileptic flashing. 73 missed calls, 216 text messages. The names on the screen blurred together. The board of directors, the vice president of public relations, editors from the Times and the Journal, and mostly, Julian. I ignored them all. The silence of the drive was medicinal. It gave me space to mourn. Not the marriage, but the hope that had birthed it. My mind drifted back 10 years. I was 22 then, fresh out of a stifling existence where every handshake came with a non-disclosure agreement and every boyfriend was vetted by a security team. I had been lonely, starving for something that felt real. I wanted to know if I was lovable without the billions attached to my surname. So I had created Ali. Ali was a watercolor artist who lived in a drafty walk-up in Brooklyn. Ali wore thrift store sweaters and worried about the price of almond milk. Ali was soft, artistic, and harmless. I met Julian in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. I remembered it with a clarity that hurt. My debit card, the one with the deliberately low balance, had been declined for a $3 latte. I was flustered, acting the part of the struggling creative. Julian had stepped up behind me. He was wearing a cheap suit that was too big for him, looking tired but kind. "I got it," he had said, swiping his card. "You do not have to do that," I had stammered. "It is just coffee," he had smiled. "Us working stiffs have to stick together." That smile, it had disarmed me completely. He did not know who I was. He did not see the heiress to an empire. He just saw a girl with paint on her fingers who needed a caffeine fix. We dated for 2 years before we married. In the beginning, he loved my simplicity. He said I was his piece. He said he loved coming home to someone who did not care about the corporate rat race. But ambition is a corrosive acid. As Julian climbed the ladder at Ethelgard, a job he got because I secretly nudged a resume onto the right desk, he began to change. He started resenting the very simplicity he had once adored. My lack of corporate killer instinct became a flaw. My art became a hobby. My contentment became lack of drive. I had created a monster. By hiding my power, I had allowed him to believe he was superior. I had fed his ego until it became a beast that turned around and bit the hand that was secretly feeding it. I pulled into the long driveway of my estate. The gates recognized my biometric signature and swung open silently. I parked, walked into the cavernous living room, and finally looked at my phone. Julian's messages were a fascinating case study in the stages of grief. 10:15 p.m. Alessandra. Pick up the phone. We need to talk. This is insane. 10:18 p.m. Baby, please, I am sorry. It was just a speech. I was trying to fit in. You know I love you. 10:30 p.m. You embarrassed me in front of the entire industry. Do you have any idea what you have done? You are delusional. You do not own anything. 10:45 p.m. I just Googled it. Oh my God. Ali, please, call me. 11 p.m. We are a team, right? We can fix this. I can help you manage the transition. I am your husband. 11:15 p.m. If you do not answer me, I am calling the police. I am worried about your mental state. 11:45 p.m. Please. I am begging you. Marcus is blaming everything on me. I turned the phone off. I poured myself a glass of vintage scotch, sat by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the dark forest, and waited for the sun to rise. The morning brought a gray, steel-colored sky and a media firestorm. I woke up at 5 in the morning, showered, and walked into my walk-in closet. I bypassed the soft, floral dresses Ali used to wear. I went to the back, to the garment bags that had remained zipped for years. I pulled out a tailored black suit, sharp enough to cut glass. I put on heels that added 3 inches to my height. I pulled my hair back into a severe, intricate knot. I applied makeup that highlighted the sharp angles of my face, stripping away the softness I had cultivated for a decade. When I looked in the mirror, Ali the artist was gone. Alessandra Ethelgard stared back. I arrived at Ethelgard Tower at 8 o'clock sharp. The atmosphere in the lobby was thick enough to choke on. Usually, the security guards would nod politely at the visitors. Today, as I walked through the revolving doors, the head of security, a man named Miller, snapped to attention so hard I thought he might hurt himself. The receptionist stopped typing. The hum of conversation died instantly. They knew. The headlines were everywhere. The sleeping queen awakes. Ethelgard heiress reveals herself at Gala. Bloodbath at the Plaza. I walked straight to the private elevator bank, the one reserved for top executives. Miller rushed ahead to scan his badge for me, overriding the security protocols that would have normally barred me. "Good morning, Mrs. Vale," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Or, Ms. Ethelgard." "Mrs. Vale is fine for now." "Miller," I said. Stepping into the elevator. "Lock down the 45th floor. No one goes in or out of Marcus Sterling's office, and seal Julian Thorne's office on the 32nd floor. Revoke their credentials immediately." "Yes, ma'am." "Already done." The elevator shot upward. When the doors opened on the executive level, the silence was absolute. My grandfather's old assistant, a woman named Patricia, who had managed to keep her job despite Marcus's reign of terror, stood at her desk. She looked at me, her eyes wide, and then she smiled. It was a genuine smile of relief. "Welcome back, Alessandra," she whispered. She was one of the few who knew who I really was, though she had been sworn to secrecy. "It is good to be back, Patricia," I said. "Get the legal team in the main conference room, and bring me Vance." 10 minutes later, I was sitting at the head of a mahogany table that was long enough to land a plane on. 5 of the most expensive corporate lawyers in New York sat to my right. To my left sat Vance, a private investigator with a face like crumpled leather and eyes that missed nothing. I had hired Vance 6 months ago. It had started as a nagging feeling, a coldness in Julian's bed, a series of late nights that did not add up, a second phone I had glimpsed in his briefcase. I had expected him to find a mistress. I had expected a cliché. "Report?" I said, leaning back in the leather chair that had once belonged to my grandfather. Vance opened a thick manila folder and slid it across the polished wood. "It is messy, Mrs. Vale," Vance said, his voice gravelly. "I know you expected infidelity, and we found that. Plenty of it." He tapped a photo on the top of the pile. It showed Julian at a restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I glanced at it. She was blonde, young, probably 22, his type, or rather, the type I used to be when he met me. "Her name is Sarah," Vance said. "She is his secretary, standard operating procedure for a midlife crisis, but that is the least of your problems." I looked up. "Go on." "About 3 months into the surveillance, we noticed something odd," Vance continued. "Julian wasn't just meeting Sarah. He was having meetings in parking garages. He was using burner phones. He was meeting with men who have very specific reputations in the industrial espionage sector." My blood ran cold. Espionage. "We dug deeper," Vance said. "Julian has been moving money, a lot of it. He has been siphoning funds from the joint account you share," which we knew, "but he has also been liquidating assets he has access to through his position as strategy director. He has been taking kickbacks from vendors." "How much?" I asked. "Roughly $2 million in the last year," Vance said. "But that is just the appetizer." Vance flipped a page in the file. It showed a bank statement from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "He is hiding assets," Vance said. "He knew a divorce might happen eventually, or maybe he was just greedy. He has been building a war chest. But here is the kicker. He is not doing it alone." "Marcus?" I said. It was not a question. "Marcus," Vance confirmed. "But there is a third player, a silent partner." Before Vance could continue, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside the conference room. I heard shouting, screaming. Actually, "Do not touch me. I am the husband of the owner. I have rights. Alessandra. It was Julian. I stood up and walked to the glass wall that separated the conference room from the lobby. Julian was there, looking nothing like the golden god of last night. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned, his hair was wild, and his eyes were manic. 2 large security guards were holding him back by the arms. He was thrashing, kicking, screaming my name like a prayer and a curse. "Let him go," I said into the intercom. The guards hesitated, then released him. Julian stumbled forward, straightening his jacket, trying to regain some shred of dignity. He saw me behind the glass and rushed toward the door. I did not open it. I just stood there, watching him. He slammed his palms against the glass. "Alessandra," he shouted, his voice muffled by the soundproofing. "Baby, please, you have to listen to me. They locked me out of the system. My keycard does not work. They are treating me like a criminal." I pressed the button on the intercom so he could hear me. "You are a criminal, Julian," I said calmly. No, I am not." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I am your husband. I made a mistake. I was drunk. The speech was a joke. You cannot destroy my life over a joke." "I am not destroying your life over a speech, Julian," I said. "I am destroying it because of what is in this folder." I held up the file Vance had given me. Julian froze. He saw the logo on the folder. He saw the photo of the offshore bank statement that I held up against the glass. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a corpse standing upright. He stopped banging on the glass. His hands fell to his sides. "You know," he mouthed. "I know," I replied. "I know about the money. I know about the kickbacks. And I am about to find out the rest." "Alessandra," he whispered. And this time, there was no arrogance, no charm, only terror. "You do not understand. I had to. They made me." "Who made you?" I asked. He looked around. paranoid, as if the walls were listening. I cannot say. They will kill me. Then you better hope the police get to you before they do, I said. I signaled the guards. They stepped forward, grabbing Julian by the elbows again. This time, he did not fight. He went limp, letting them drag him away toward the elevators. I turned back to the table. The lawyers were looking at me with a mixture of fear and professional admiration. Vance, I said, sitting back down. Continue. You said there was a third player. Who is it? Vance took a deep breath. This is the part that is going to hurt. Mrs. Vale, he said. He slid another photo across the table. Julian is not just sleeping with his secretary, Vance said. He has another lover, someone he has been seeing for 2 years, someone who has been feeding him information on how to manipulate you. I looked at the photo. It was grainy, taken from a long distance, but the faces were clear. Julian was sitting in a car, kissing a woman. I recognized her instantly. It was Lydia Sterling, Marcus Sterling's wife. My stomach turned over. Lydia, the woman who had befriended me at company picnics, the woman who had told me I should be grateful for a husband like Julian, the woman who had mocked my dress last night. They are not just sleeping together, Vance said, his voice grim. They are conspiring. Julian, Marcus, and Lydia. It is a 3-way partnership, and their goal was not just to steal money. Vance pulled out the final document. It was a blueprint. They built a shell company, Vance said, Phoenix Corporation, and they have been preparing to transfer something to it, something big. What? I asked, though I had a sick feeling I already knew. Project Lazarus, Vance said. The room went silent. Project Lazarus was the code name for our newest, most revolutionary cancer research. It was worth billions. It was the future of the company. They were going to steal the research, Vance said, and they were going to sell it to a competitor in Shanghai. The deal is supposed to go down in 3 days. I closed my eyes. It was not just betrayal. It was an execution. They were not just planning to leave me. They were planning to gut my family's legacy and leave me with a hollow shell. I opened my eyes. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Gentlemen, I said to the lawyers, we are not going to sue him. We aren't? The lead counsel asked, confused. No, I said. Suing him is a civil matter. It implies a dispute between equals. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that my family had helped build. We are going to let them think they are succeeding, I said. We are going to let them proceed with the deal, and then we are going to bury them. You want to set a trap, Vance said, a small smile playing on his lips. I want to catch them in the act, I said. I want federal prison. I want no parole. And I want to watch the moment they realize they lost everything to the useless wife. The conference room air conditioner hummed with a low, artificial drone that seemed to amplify the silence hanging over the mahogany table. Vance, my private investigator, sat opposite me, his face illuminated by the blue light of his tablet. To my right, the team of forensic accountants I had assembled an hour ago were already deep into the digital autopsy of my husband's life. We were moving past the emotional shock of infidelity and entering the cold, clinical world of forensic analysis. This was where I thrived. Emotions are messy variables, but numbers never lie. You need to see the relationship map, Vance said, sliding his tablet across the polished wood. I looked at the screen. It was a visual representation of the communication frequency between 3 nodes Julian, Marcus, and a third node labeled LS. Lydia Sterling, I said, my voice flat. It is a textbook triangle of mutually assured destruction, Vance explained, pointing a stylus at the lines connecting them. Julian sleeps with the boss's wife, Marcus knows, or at least he suspects enough to use it. But here's the twisted part. Julian is not just sleeping with Lydia for pleasure. He is sleeping with her for access. I zoomed in on the data points. The timestamps of their meetings coincided perfectly with the board meetings Marcus held at his private residence. Lydia was the courier, I realized aloud. She was passing physical documents to Julian that Marcus could not risk sending digitally. And Marcus, he was letting it happen. Because it gave him leverage, Vance nodded. And because it kept Julian loyal. It is a sick ecosystem. Mrs. Vale, Julian feels like a conqueror because he is bedding the CEO's wife, but in reality, he is just a pawn being moved by both of them. But that is just the social dynamic. The financial dynamic is where it gets criminal. Vance swiped the screen to a new document, a corporate registration filing. Phoenix Corporation, I read. Registered in Delaware 6 months ago. Shell Company. Who are the signatories? A blind trust, Vance said. But look at the registered agent. It is the same lawyer who handles Marcus Sterling's estate planning. And look at the funding source for the initial capitalization. I traced the line. It led back to a series of microtransactions from a vendor account within Ethelgard's supply chain division. They are siphoning operating capital to build the infrastructure, I said, my mind racing. But a few $1,000,000 is not the endgame. You do not risk federal prison for pocket change. What is the product? Vance looked at me with genuine gravity. Project Lazarus. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Project Lazarus was the crown jewel of Ethelgard's RD department. It was a proprietary immunotherapy protocol that had shown a 99% efficacy rate in early trials for aggressive pancreatic cancer. It was not just a drug, it was a miracle, and it was valued, conservatively, at $12 billion over the next decade. They are going to steal it, I whispered. Not just steal it, Vance corrected. They are going to clone it. They have been copying the raw data files to an external server hosted by Phoenix Corporation. The plan was to transfer the final clinical trial data this week, wipe the servers at Ethelgard to make it look like a catastrophic system failure, and then discover the same molecule at Phoenix Corporation a month later, and then sell it, I finished the thought. To whom? Sino-Biopharma, Vance said. We found encrypted correspondence. The buyer in Shanghai is waiting for the transfer. They are offering $2 billion in cash, deposited into numbered accounts in Zurich, plus a royalty stream. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The sheer scale of the audacity was breathtaking. They were not just going to leave me. They were going to hollow out my grandfather's legacy, sell the cure for cancer to the highest bidder, and leave Ethelgard a smoking ruin. And suddenly, the Gala made perfect sense. The speech, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Marcus's speech, the promotion, it was not about ego. No, Vance agreed. It was about access clearance. To download the Level 5 data for Project Lazarus, you need the biometric clearance of a C-suite executive. By promoting Julian to Global Strategy Director, Marcus gave him the keys to the kingdom without raising an alarm. The IT department wouldn't flag a massive data download if it came from the Director of Strategy. And the insults, I murmured. The useless wife narrative. It was brilliant, in a twisted, sociopathic way, by painting me as a simpleton, as a burden, as a woman who cared only about flowers and lunch dates. They had created a psychological blind spot. No one suspects the useless wife is auditing the books. No one suspects the anchor is actually the captain of the ship, my disguise. The one I had worn to protect our love had become their greatest weapon against me, or so they thought. There is one more thing, one of the forensic accountants spoke up from the end of the table. He was a young man with thick glasses, and he looked terrified. Mrs. Vale, you need to see this. It concerns your personal finances. I turned to him. I keep my personal account separate from the joint account. Julian has no access. He did not need access, the accountant said, pulling up a digital loan agreement on the main screen. He just needed your name. I looked at the document. It was a promissory note to a private lending institution, the kind that charges 40% interest and operates out of storefronts in dubious neighborhoods. The loan was for $3 million, and there, at the bottom, was my signature. It was a good forgery. He had practiced, but the loop on the A was slightly too wide. He forged my signature, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He took out 3 separate loans totaling $8 million against the equity of the house you live in, the accountant said. He used your identity as the guarantor. If he defaults, they come after you. Where did the money go? I asked. He did not spend $8 million on suits and dinners. Crypto, the accountant said, shaking his head. And high-risk leverage trading. He was betting against the market, trying to short-squeeze tech stocks. He lost everything. He is underwater. Mrs. Vale, deep underwater. That is why he is so desperate for the Phoenix deal to go through. He owes money to people who break legs for a living. I felt a wave of nausea, followed instantly by a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer a corporate dispute. This was identity theft. This was fraud. This was a man who had looked me in the eye every morning, kissed me goodbye, and then systematically dismantled my financial identity to fund his gambling addiction. That settles it, I said. Standing up, Vance, package everything, the forgery, the Phoenix registration, the communication logs with Shanghai. We are not just filing for divorce. We are filing criminal charges for grand larceny, corporate espionage, identity theft, and fraud. The police are already on their way to pick up the paper trail, Vance said. But Mrs. Vale, you need to handle the family front. The news is breaking. He pointed to the television mounted on the wall. I turned to see the logo of a major 24-hour news network. The headline screamed in bold red letters, "Scandal at the Plaza. Husband speaks out." And there was Julian. He was sitting in a studio, looking disheveled but sympathetic. He was wearing a soft blue sweater, not a suit. He looked vulnerable. He looked like a victim. I turned up the volume. "I just want my wife to get help," Julian was saying to the interviewer, his voice breaking with practiced emotion. "Alessandra has struggled with mental health issues for years. She has these episodes, delusions of grandeur. She invents stories to cope with her depression." The interviewer, a woman known for her softball questions, leaned in with a concerned expression. "So, her claim last night about owning Ethelgard, about being the heiress." Julian shook his head sadly. "It is a tragedy. She has convinced herself of this fantasy. I have tried to protect her. I have tried to keep her out of the spotlight so she wouldn't embarrass herself. That speech I gave, it was a clumsy attempt to deflect attention, to play along with her narrative that she is just a simple wife, because the truth that she is deeply unwell is too painful to share." He wiped a tear from his eye. "I love her," he sobbed. "I just want her to come home so we can get her back on her medication. She is not safe out there. She is paranoid. She thinks everyone is conspiring against her." I stared at the screen. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was using the very secrecy I had maintained against me. Since no one knew the truth about my lineage, his lie sounded plausible. Who was more believable? The charismatic executive or the recluse who suddenly claimed to be a billionaire queen? I pulled out my phone. I ignored the hundreds of messages and dialed the one number that mattered. "Lucas," I said when my son answered. "Mom." His voice was guarded. "Mom, we are watching TV. Dad is saying you are sick. Is it true Emma is crying? She says she doesn't know what to believe. Listen to me carefully. Lucas," I said, my voice steady. "I need you and Emma to meet me, right now." "Dad said we shouldn't," Lucas said. "He said you might be dangerous. He said you are off your meds." "Lucas," I cut him off. "Have I ever lied to you? In 19 years, have I ever lied to you about who I am as a mother?" Silence on the other end. "I am sending a car to your dorm," I said. "It will bring you to the estate in the Hudson Valley, not the house in Scarsdale, the estate. You know the one I took you to for picnics when you were little, the one I said belonged to a friend?" "Yeah," Lucas said, his voice small. "It is mine," I said. "It has always been mine. Come home. Lucas, I will show you the truth, not stories, evidence. I hung up. I turned back to the TV. The pundits were already dissecting Julian's interview. The public opinion was shifting. Twitter was flooded with hashtags. Pray for Alessandra and poor Julian were trending. They were calling him a saint for staying with a crazy woman. They were analyzing my manic behavior at the gala. They had no idea. Julian thought he had won the narrative war. He thought that by painting me as insane, he could invalidate my actions, perhaps even get power of attorney over me to stop the investigation. It was a desperate, clawing move from a drowning man. I looked at Vance. "Get the press release ready," I said. "But do not release it yet. Let him talk. Let him dig his grave so deep that he will never climb out." "What are you going to do?" Vance asked. "I am going to have tea with my children," I said, picking up my purse. "And then I am going to introduce Julian to the only thing more dangerous than a useless wife." "What is that?" "A mother who has been accused of being crazy," I said, walking toward the door. "He wants a crazy woman. Fine. I will show him exactly how crazy I can get when someone threatens my family." I walked out of the conference room. The game had changed. He had brought our children into the line of fire. He had poisoned their perception of me to save his own skin. For that, there would be no mercy, no settlement, no plea deal. I would take everything. I would strip him down to the bone, and I would leave him with nothing but the truth he was so desperate to hide. The cafe was called The Cloisters, a small, unassuming spot tucked away on a quiet street in the Upper West Side, far from the prying lenses of the paparazzi who were currently besieging my estate. I had chosen it for its privacy, but as I sat in the corner booth, my hands wrapped around a cup of herbal tea that had long since gone cold, I felt exposed. I was not facing a boardroom of hostile shareholders or a corrupt husband. I was facing the only two people in the world whose opinion could actually break me. The door chime tinkled, and they walked in. Lucas and Emma, my twins, 19 years old. They looked exhausted. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale without makeup. She wore an oversized university hoodie as if trying to disappear inside it. Lucas looked different. His jaw was set tight, his shoulders hunched in a defensive posture that mirrored his father's when he was cornered. He scanned the room, saw me, and for the first time in his life, he did not smile. They slid into the booth opposite me. The distance across the small table felt like an ocean. "Hi," I whispered. "Is it true?" Lucas asked immediately. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He just threw the question like a grenade. "Dad called us. He said you have been lying to us our whole lives. He said He said you are a billionaire," Emma finished, her voice trembling. "And that you hid it because you didn't trust us." Dad was crying. "Mom, I have never heard him cry like that." I took a deep breath. Julian had done his work well. He had played the victim card, weaponizing their confusion before I could even open my mouth. "I did not lie to you about who I am," I said softly. "I am your mother. That is the only title that matters. But yes, the money, the heritage. It is true. I am an Ethelgard." "Why?" Lucas slammed his hand on the table, making the cutlery rattle. A few patrons looked over, but I ignored them. "Why would you do that? Do you know how hard it was for me last semester? I was working double shifts at the library just to pay for my textbooks. I was eating ramen every night. And you were sitting on billions." His anger was palpable, a hot, sharp thing, and it hurt because he was right. From his perspective, it looked like cruelty. "I watched you struggle, Lucas," I said, meeting his gaze. "And I was proud of you. Every single shift you worked, every grade you earned. You did it. Not my money, not my name. You built your character." "That is bullshit," Lucas spat. "That is rich people bullshit. You let us struggle because it was some kind of experiment for you while Dad was stressing out about the mortgage he told us. Mom, he told us how he stayed up nights worrying about bills, and you just watched him suffer." "Your father," I said, my voice hardening slightly. Never worried about a bill in his life. The struggle you saw, it was performance art. I paid off the mortgage on the Scarsdale house 5 years ago. I put money in his account every month to cover expenses. If he told you he was struggling, it was because he was spending that money on other things. Don't talk about him like that, Emma whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. He loves you. He loves us. He called us this morning and begged us to check on you because he is scared you are having a breakdown. He said you are imagining things. He said you think he is having an affair. I reached into my bag. My hand brushed against the thick file Vance had given me. I hesitated. Did I really want to do this? Did I want to shatter their world? But then I remembered Julian's interview. She is unstable. She is delusional. He was not protecting them. He was using them as human shields. If I did not show them the truth now, he would turn them against me forever. I pulled out a slim manila envelope, not the whole file, just enough. I am not imagining things, Emma, I said. I wish I were. I slid the photos across the table. They were the pictures of Julian with Sarah, the secretary, and a few others of him entering hotels with women whose faces were blurred but clearly were not me. Emma looked down. Her breath hitched. She picked up a photo of her father, her hero, the man who taught her to ride a bike kissing a blonde woman in a hotel lobby. The date stamp was from last week. No, she whimpered. This could be photoshopped. Dad said you might do this. He said you would try to frame him. Look at the credit card statements underneath, I said gently. Lucas pulled the papers out. He scanned the lines. Hotel charges, jewelry stores, thousands of dollars spent at high-end lingerie boutiques that I had never set foot in. This is his personal card, Lucas muttered. The one he said was for business expenses. He looked up at me, the anger in his eyes replaced by a dawning, sickening realization. He lied, Lucas said. It wasn't a question. He has been lying for a long time, I said. And not just about women. He has been gambling. Lucas, the money troubles he told you about, they were real. But not because we were poor. They were real because he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars betting on crypto and high-risk stocks. He stole from your college funds. What? Emma looked up. Her face streaked with mascara. The savings account your grandmother left you, I said. Check it, right now, on your phone. Lucas pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. He logged into his banking app. He tapped the screen a few times. His face went white. It is gone, he whispered. There is $12 in it. There was supposed to be 50,000. He forged my signature to authorize the withdrawal 3 months ago, I said. I found out yesterday. The silence that followed was heavy with the sound of illusions shattering. The father they knew, the hard-working, stressed provider, was dead. In his place was a thief, a liar. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed again. I felt a chill run down my spine before I even turned around. Lucas, Emma. It was Julian. He stood in the doorway, breathless, his hair disheveled, wearing the same sympathetic blue sweater from the TV interview. He looked frantic, like a man who had run all the way here. Thank God, he gasped. Rushing over to the table, he ignored me completely and fell to his knees beside Emma, grabbing her hands. Baby, are you okay? Did she hurt you? I tracked your phone. I was so scared. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was panting, his eyes wide with manufactured panic. Dad. Emma pulled her hands away, looking at him with fresh horror. I know, Julian said, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. She has been telling you crazy things, right, about money, about affairs. It is the sickness, honey. It is her paranoia. I tried to shield you from it, but she is not well. He turned to Lucas, reaching out a hand. Son, come on. We need to get Mom to a doctor. Help me get her to the car. Lucas stared at his father. He looked at the man kneeling on the floor, performing the role of the concerned patriarch. Then he looked at the phone in his hand, the screen still showing the $12 balance. Where is the money, Dad? Lucas asked. His voice was cold. Julian froze. What? My college fund, Lucas said. Grandma's money. Where is it? Julian blinked, his eyes darting to the left. A tell. It is invested, son. I moved it to a better portfolio. To grow it for you. Why are we talking about money when your mother is having a breakdown? Invested in what? Lucas pressed. Crypto. The same crypto you lost everything on. Julian stood up slowly. The act was slipping. The concerned father mask was cracking, revealing the desperate gambler underneath. You have been listening to her lies, Julian sneered, pointing a shaking finger at me. She is poisoning you against me. After everything I have done for this family, I worked my ass off for you kids. You stole from them. Julian, I said. I did not stand up. I sat perfectly still, my voice calm. You stole their future to pay for your mistakes. I did it for us, Julian screamed, causing the entire cafe to go silent. The barista was reaching for the phone, probably to call the police. I was trying to win it back. I was one trade away from fixing everything. And you ungrateful. He lunged toward the table. Lucas stood up instantly, stepping between me and his father. He was taller than Julian now, broader. Back off, Lucas said. Julian stopped. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and realized he had lost him. He looked at Emma, who was shrinking into the corner of the booth, clutching the photos of his infidelity. I am your father, Julian stammered, his voice losing its power. You owe me respect. You owe me $50,000, Lucas said. I stood up then. I walked around the table and stood next to my son. You have 5 seconds to leave, Julian, I said, or I will show them the rest. I will show them the Phoenix file. Julian's eyes widened. He knew what that meant. The infidelity was one thing, the theft was another. But Phoenix, that was prison. That was treason. You wouldn't, he hissed. Try me, I said. You just withdrew $50,000 from our joint account this morning at 9:05. I got the alert. You used it to pay a bookie in Jersey. Didn't you? A man named Sal? Julian turned pale. Go, I said. He looked at Lucas. Son, please. Lucas turned his head away. He looked at Emma. She buried her face in her hands. Defeated. Julian backed away. He looked at me with pure hatred, a look that promised retribution, before turning and storming out of the cafe. The silence he left behind was deafening. I am sorry, I whispered to my children. I am so sorry you had to see that. Emma threw herself into my arms. Sobbing, I held her tight, smelling the vanilla shampoo she had used since she was 12. Lucas stood there for a moment, his fists clenched, trying not to cry. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around both of us. We need to go, Lucas said, his voice thick. We cannot stay here. He knows where we are. We are going home, I said. My home, the real one. We left the cafe. My security team was waiting outside 3 SUVs with tinted windows. I saw the shock on Lucas's face as 2 large men in suits opened the doors for us. Who are they? He asked. They are the people who are going to keep us safe, I said. As we drove north toward the estate, I watched my children in the rearview mirror. They were shell-shocked. Their innocence had been stripped away in a dirty cafe on a Tuesday morning. I hated Julian for that more than anything, but they were safe. They were with me. And now that the children were secure, I could take the gloves off. Julian had threatened my family. He had stolen from my son. He had gaslit my daughter. He wanted a war. I picked up my phone and dialed Vance. Initiate phase 2, I said. Release the hounds. Are you sure? Vance asked. Once we do this, there is no going back. I looked at Emma, sleeping fitfully against her brother's shoulder. Burn him, I said. Burn it all down. Silence is a weapon. If you hold it long enough, people will fill it with their own noise, their own insecurities, and eventually, their own mistakes. For 3 days following the extraction of my children. I went dark. I issued no press releases. I gave no interviews. I did not respond to the tidal wave of speculation that was currently drowning every media outlet in the country. To the world, I was the reclusive heiress who had suffered a psychotic break. To Julian and Marcus, I was a terrified woman cowering in her fortress, paralyzed by the sudden collapse of her marriage and the exposure of her secrets. They thought I was hiding. In reality, I was hunting. I sat in the secure server room deep beneath the Ethelgard estate. It was a windowless bunker cooled to a precise 65 degrees, filled with the hum of processors that rivaled the power of the Pentagon. Next to me sat Kovalenko, my director of cybersecurity. He was a man of few words who typed faster than most people could think. "They are knocking at the back door. Mrs. Vale," Kovalenko said, his eyes fixed on the wall of monitors. "Source IP is routed through a VPN in Estonia, but the biometric signature is local. It is Thorne's keycard access." "He is using the global strategy credentials," I said, sipping my black coffee. "Predictable." "They are probing the R&D firewall," Kovalenko reported. "Specifically looking for the Lazarus directory. The system is automatically blocking them. Should I increase the encryption protocols?" "No," I said. "Lower the drawbridge." Kovalenko stopped typing. He turned his chair to face me. "Ma'am, if I lower the firewall, they will have access to the core data. They will take the formula." "I know," I said. "Open port 8080. Route them through the honeypot server. Let them think they have bypassed our security. Give them the file." Kovalenko hesitated. "The Lazarus formula is worth $12 billion. If this leaks..." "It won't be the Lazarus formula," I said, sliding a flash drive across the desk to him. "Swap the source code with this." Kovalenko picked up the drive. "What is on this?" I had the lab technicians make a slight adjustment to the molecular structure in the documentation. I explained, my voice devoid of emotion. "It looks identical to the cure. Same chemical weight, same bonding agents. But if they try to manufacture it, the resulting compound won't cure pancreatic cancer. It will be an inert saline solution that turns bright blue upon contact with human blood." A small, grim smile touched Kovalenko's lips. "So they are stealing a placebo." "They are stealing a lawsuit," I corrected. "And they are stealing evidence. Once that file lands on their server, we have them for corporate espionage. But more importantly, when they sell it to the buyer, they will be selling a dud. They will be committing fraud against a criminal organization. I imagine the triads in Shanghai do not have a robust customer service department for refunds." "Initiating transfer now," Kovalenko said. He typed a command. On the large screen, a progress bar appeared. Project _ Lazarus _ final, ENS, downloading, 10%, 20%. I watched the numbers climb. Somewhere in a safe house or a hotel room, Julian and Marcus were likely high-fiving. They thought they had just pulled off the heist of the century. They thought they were downloading their golden parachute. "Download complete." "They have it," Kovalenko said. They disconnected immediately. "Good," I said. Standing up. "Now we wait for them to try and sell it." I left the server room and went upstairs to my study. The morning sun was filtering through the trees, casting long shadows across the mahogany floor. On my desk, a stack of legal documents sat waiting for me. They had been delivered by a courier an hour ago. The divorce papers. I sat down and flipped through them. Julian had not just filed for divorce, he had declared war. His lawyer was a man named Sterling, no relation to Marcus. Ironically, a notorious shark, known for dragging high-profile spouses through the mud. The demands were staggering. Julian was asking for 50% of the Ethelgard assets acquired during the marriage. I read the clause out loud to the empty room, my voice dripping with disbelief. The petitioner asserts that his strategic guidance and management as Global Strategy Director were instrumental in the 42% growth of the company's valuation. Therefore, the increase in asset value is deemed marital property subject to equitable distribution. He wanted half the company. He wanted half of my grandfather's legacy. He claimed his genius was the reason Ethelgard was successful, conveniently forgetting that I had been the one secretly approving his initiatives and fixing his mistakes for 5 years. And then, I turned the page to the section regarding custody. Petitioner requests full physical and legal custody of the children, Lucas Thorne and Emma Thorne, citing the respondent's documented history of mental instability and recent erratic behavior. My hand tightened on the paper, crumpling the edge. He did not want the kids. He knew Lucas and Emma were legal adults at 19, but he was using this to paint a narrative. He wanted the world to see me as unfit. He wanted to destroy my credibility so that when I accused him of theft, it would look like the ravings of a scorned, crazy ex-wife. My phone buzzed. It was Vance. "We have movement," Vance said. The connection was crisp. "The tracker we placed on Marcus's vehicle is active. He is at the Teterboro Airport private terminal." "Is he leaving?" I asked. "Not yet," Vance said. "He is meeting with a pilot. We hacked the flight plan. He has a departure scheduled for tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Destination is Sao Paulo, Brazil." "Brazil," I mused. "Non-extradition treaty for financial crimes if you have the right lawyers." "He is cutting and running. Mrs. Vale," Vance said. "He is going to take his cut of the sale and leave Julian holding the bag." "Does Julian know?" "I doubt it," Vance chuckled. "Julian is currently at a tailor in Midtown getting fitted for a new suit. He thinks he is about to become the king of New York. He has no idea his partner is about to leave him to rot." "We cannot let Marcus get on that plane," I said. "We won't," Vance promised. "But we need to know when the exchange happens. The buyer won't transfer $2 billion for a digital file sent over email. It is too much money. They will want physical possession of the drive and a biometric key exchange." "They will do it at the docks," I said. "It is the only place they control, the shipping terminal in Newark. Ethelgard has a logistics hub there, but Marcus leases a private warehouse in the back lot through a shell company. It is off the grid." "I will get a team in position," Vance said. "No," I said. "Not just your team. Vance, I am calling the FBI. We are going to do this by the book. I want arrest warrants. I want a federal takedown." "The FBI will want proof before they mobilize a SWAT team," Vance cautioned. "I will give them proof," I said. "I am going to let them listen to the deal." That afternoon, I drove to the federal building in Manhattan. I met with Assistant Director Miller, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. I laid out the evidence: the forged loans, the shell company registration, the communication logs with the Chinese buyers, and the backdoor log showing the theft of the fake Lazarus data. Miller looked through the file for 20 minutes in silence. When she looked up, her expression was grim. "This is compelling, Mrs. Vale," she said. "But entrapment is a tricky defense. You authorize the opening of the firewall." "I did not authorize the theft," I countered. "I merely left the door unlocked because I knew there was a thief in the house. If I leave my front door open and you walk in and steal my television, you are still a burglar." Miller nodded slowly. "And the sale, you know where it is happening." "Tomorrow night," I said. 10 p.m., Newark Terminal B, Warehouse 4. They are meeting a representative from Sino-Biopharma. If we move in too early, they will claim it was a legitimate business meeting, Miller said. We have to wait until the exchange happens. We need to see the drive change hands and the money transfer confirmed. I understand, I said. I want to be there. Absolutely not, Miller said. Civilians are not permitted in a tactical operation. I am not a civilian, I said. Leaning forward, I am the owner of the property where the crime is taking place, and I am the victim. I will stay in the command van, but I need to see it. I need to see the look on his face when he realizes he lost. Miller studied me. She saw the resolve in my jaw, the same resolve that had built the Ethelgard empire. You stay in the van, she said. If you step 1 foot outside, I will arrest you for obstruction. Deal, The next 24 hours were a blur of adrenaline and cold calculation. I spent the night at the estate, comforting Lucas and Emma, telling them that it would all be over soon. I did not tell them the details. They had seen enough ugliness. The night of the exchange was foggy. A thick, wet mist rolled off the Hudson River, obscuring the lights of the Jersey shoreline. I sat in the back of an unmarked surveillance van parked 300 yards from Warehouse 4. Inside the van, it was a hive of activity. FBI agents, wearing headsets, stared at monitors. A drone hovered silently above the warehouse, transmitting a thermal image of the scene below. 2 vehicles approaching, an agent announced. Black SUV and a sedan. On the screen, I saw the cars pull up to the warehouse. 3 figures got out of the SUV. "That is Julian," I whispered, pointing at the thermal silhouette. Even in infrared, I recognized his posture, the nervous pacing, the way he checked his watch. The second figure was Marcus. He was calmer, standing by the trunk of the car. The sedan door opened, and 2 men in trench coats stepped out. The buyers. "Audio is live," the agent said. He adjusted a dial, and suddenly, voices filled the van. They were being picked up by a parabolic microphone aimed at the group. "Money had better be in the account. Gentlemen," Marcus's voice crackled. "The funds are in escrow," a heavily accented voice replied. "Once we verify the hash key of the drive, the transfer executes automatically. $2 billion. "Here it is," Julian said. I could hear the tremor in his voice. "Project Lazarus, the complete data set. Clinical trials, molecular structure, synthesis protocols, it is all there. You seem nervous." "Mr. Thorne," the buyer noted. "I just want to get this done," Julian snapped. "My wife she is making things difficult. I need to get out of here." "Your wife is a non-issue," Marcus said smoothly. "She is drowning in legal fees. By the time she realizes what happened, we will be ghosts." I watched the screen. Julian handed a silver hard drive to the buyer. The buyer plugged it into a ruggedized laptop resting on the hood of the car. "Verifying," the buyer muttered. I held my breath. This was the moment. If they checked the chemistry too closely, they would see the flaw, but they were likely just checking the file size and the directory structure to ensure it wasn't empty. "Hash key confirmed," the buyer said. "It looks complete." "The money," Marcus demanded. "Transferring now," the buyer said. "We have confirmation of a wire transfer," an FBI agent in the van shouted. "Funds moving to a Swiss account linked to Phoenix Corp. The crime is consummated." Director Miller grabbed her radio. "All units, move in, go, go, go." On the screen, the night exploded. Floodlights from every corner of the shipyard blinded the group by the warehouse. Flashbang grenades detonated with blinding white light and deafening cracks. Armored vehicles smashed through the chain-link fence. Federal agents dropped to the ground now. The audio feed turned into chaos. I heard Julian scream. It was a high, terrified sound. I didn't do it. It was him. It was Marcus. I watched on the monitor as Julian Thorne, the man who wanted to be a king, fell to his knees in the mud. He threw his hands up, surrendering instantly. Marcus tried to run. He made a break for the SUV, but a tactical officer tackled him before he could even open the door. The buyers were on the ground, zip-tied. "Target secure," a voice crackled over the radio. "We have the drive." "We have the suspects." Director Miller looked at me. "It is over. Mrs. Vale." "Not yet," I said, opening the door of the van. "I have one last thing to say." I stepped out into the damp night air. The fog swirled around the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers. I walked across the wet asphalt, my heels clicking softly. They were lined up against the wall of the warehouse. Julian was shivering, mud staining his expensive suit. His face was streaked with tears and grime. Marcus looked dazed, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. When Julian saw me emerging from the mist, flanked by agents, his eyes went wide. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Alessandra," he croaked. You did this?" I stopped 10 feet away from him. I looked at the man I had loved for a decade, the man I had protected, the man who had tried to sell my life's work for a gambling debt. "I told you, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the sirens. "I told you that you were working in the archives starting tomorrow." I pointed to the federal agents. "Well, plans changed. You are not going to the archives. You are going to a place with even fewer windows." "Baby, please," he sobbed, trying to crawl toward me, but an agent held him back. "I can explain. It was a sting. I was trying to catch Marcus. I was working for you. Tell them I am your husband." "My husband died a long time ago," I said coldly. "You are just the thief who stole his face." I turned to Marcus. He wasn't begging. He was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You switched the data," Marcus spat. "Didn't you? The buyer is going to kill us when they find out." "I would worry less about the buyer," I said, "and more about the fact that you just admitted to a federal conspiracy on a recorded line." I signaled to Miller, "Take them away," as they dragged Julian toward the police van. He screamed my name one last time. It echoed in the empty warehouse, a pathetic, dying sound. I watched the doors slam shut. I watched the taillights fade into the fog. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The anchor was gone. I had cut the rope, but the war wasn't quite over. Julian still had one card left to play, the one Vance had warned me about, the nuclear option. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Nice move at the docks, but if you don't drop the charges, the video of what we did in the master bedroom goes viral in 10 minutes. Check your email." I stopped. I looked at the phone. The sweet trap had worked. I had caught them. But now, the beast was cornered, and it was lashing out with its final, poisonous claw. I opened the email. I watched the first 3 seconds of the attachment. It was exactly what he threatened. Intimate, private, humiliating. I closed my eyes. He thought this would break me. He thought shame would make me fold. He was wrong. I deleted the email. "Vance," I said into the phone as I got into my car. "Call the press. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. "What are you going to do?" Vance asked, sounding worried. "I am going to finish this," I said. "He wants to show the world who I am. Fine, I will show them." The heavy metal door of the interrogation room slammed shut, sealing the sound of the chaotic precinct outside. I stood in the observation booth, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, staring through the one-way mirror. On the other side of the glass, Julian sat handcuffed to a steel table. He looked nothing like the man who had worn bespoke tuxedos in charmed boardrooms. The mud from the Newark shipyard was drying on his face, cracking like old pottery. His tie was missing removed to prevent self-harm, and his expensive Italian shirt was torn at the shoulder. He was shaking, a rhythmic, uncontrollable tremor that rattled the chain of his handcuffs against the table. "He looks small," Vance said, standing beside me. His voice was devoid of satisfaction. "They always look small when the music stops." "Where is Marcus?" I asked, my eyes never leaving Julian. "That is the complication," Vance admitted, tapping his tablet. "The man the tactical team tackled at the SUV wasn't Marcus. It was a decoy, a bodyguard wearing Marcus's coat. The real Marcus Sterling never stepped foot out of the vehicle. He saw the flashbangs, pushed his driver out to take the fall, and slipped away in the chaos using a secondary extraction car he had waiting in the shadows. We lost him at the turnpike." My stomach tightened. "He is running. He is trying to," Vance said. "But he made a mistake. He left Julian behind." I looked back at my husband. He was the loose end. He was the fall guy. Marcus had orchestrated the entire drop to ensure that if things went wrong, Julian would be the one holding the hard drive, and Julian would be the one in cuffs. Assistant Director Miller entered the interrogation room. She carried a laptop and a thick file. She did not sit down. She simply placed the laptop on the table, opened it, and pressed play. I watched the screen in the observation booth. It was the footage from the parabolic camera we had used during the sting operation 2 hours ago. The audio was crystal clear. On the screen, Julian was standing in the fog, holding the silver hard drive. He looked nervous. Yes, but there was something else in his voice. Arrogance. "You are sure this is the correct data?" the buyer's voice asked on the recording. "It is the only copy," Julian's voice replied, loud and clear. "I pulled it from the mainframe myself. My wife. God, she has no idea. She is probably sitting in her garden right now, crying over some roses." I saw Julian in the interrogation room flinch as he heard his own voice. "She is useless." The recording continued. "She thinks she is the Queen of Ethelgard because of her last name, but she does not know the first thing about power. I played her, for 10 years. I played the devoted husband, and she bought every second of it. I built that company while she painted her little watercolors. This is my severance package." Miller paused the video. The silence in the interrogation room was heavy. "That is a confession, Mr. Thorne," Miller said, her voice cool and professional. "Corporate espionage, grand larceny, fraud, conspiracy to commit treason by selling restricted biotechnology to a foreign entity. We have the drive, we have the wire transfer confirmation, and we have you, on tape, admitting you stole it." Julian looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with panic and exhaustion. I was lying," he stammered. "I was just trying to impress the buyer. I had to sell the story." "You sold the company, Julian," Miller said. "Or you tried to. You are looking at 20 years. Federal time. No parole." Julian let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. He slumped forward, his forehead resting on the cold steel table. "Unless," Miller said, letting the word hang in the air. Julian's head snapped up. "Unless what?" "Unless you give us the architect," Miller said. "We know you didn't set up the shell company. Julian, you are not smart enough to route the money through the Caymans. That was Marcus. We want Marcus Sterling." Julian did not hesitate. There was no loyalty left in him. The moment he realized he was trapped, he turned on his partner with the vicious speed of a cornered rat. "It was him!" Julian screamed, straining against his cuffs. "He made me do it. He told me I had to deliver the drive. He said he couldn't be seen holding it because he was under surveillance. He set me up." "Where is he going?" "Julian?" Miller asked. "He has a plane." Julian spat the words out. "A Gulfstream. It is registered to Phoenix Corp. He is flying to Sao Paulo. He has a villa there. He said if anything went wrong, we would meet there." "Which airport?" "Teterboro," Julian cried. "Hangar 4. He is leaving tonight. You have to catch him. He has the codes. He has the rest of the money." Miller looked at the glass, locking eyes with me even though she couldn't see me. She nodded. "Get a team to Teterboro," she said into her radio. "Ground all flights. Seal the perimeter. We have a runner." I watched Julian as Miller left the room. He was weeping now, muttering to himself, blaming everyone but himself. He blamed Marcus. He blamed the buyers. He blamed me. He was a man who had never taken responsibility for a single action in his life. And even now, facing the ruin of his own making, he was searching for a scapegoat. "Do you want to go in?" Vance asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. Let him sit with it." 20 minutes later, the news broke. The television in the precinct lobby was tuned to CNN. The banner at the bottom of the screen flashed in urgent red breaking news: Ethelgard CEO arrested. The footage was shaky, shot from a news helicopter circling Teterboro Airport. It showed a sleek white private jet sitting on the tarmac, surrounded by flashing lights. FBI vehicles had blocked the runway. Agents in tactical gear were leading a figure down the stairs of the plane. It was Marcus Sterling. He was still wearing his tuxedo from the Gala, though now it was rumpled. He was not fighting. He walked with his head down, his silver hair blowing in the wind of the jet turbines. The arrogance was gone. The veneer of the untouchable CEO had been stripped away, leaving just another criminal in handcuffs. "They got him," Vance said, watching the screen. Julian was right. He was 5 minutes away from takeoff. The reporter's voice was breathless. Sources confirm that Marcus Sterling and Julian Thorne, high-ranking executives at Ethelgard Holdings, have been taken into federal custody in connection with a massive industrial espionage ring. The alleged theft involves the company's flagship cancer research, Project Lazarus. This is one of the largest corporate scandals in American history. I turned away from the screen. The world finally knew. The secret I had carried. The investigation I had funded. The trap I had laid, it was all public now. The rot had been cut out. Mrs. Vale. I turned to see a man in a sharp gray suit standing in the doorway of the observation booth. He held a briefcase and wore the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. "I am Arthur Pendleton," he said. "I am representing Mr. Thorne." "You are wasting your time," I said, turning back to the window where Julian was currently drinking a cup of water with shaking hands. "He has already confessed. It is on tape." "A confession made under duress," Pendleton said smoothly, stepping into the room. "And without counsel present, we will have that thrown out by morning." "He waived his right to counsel," Vance interjected. Stepping between me and the lawyer, "We have that on tape, too." Pendleton waved a hand dismissively. "Procedural details. We can argue about that in court. I am here to discuss a different matter. A settlement." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A settlement. Mr. Pendleton, your client tried to steal $12 billion from my family. He defrauded my children. He is going to prison for the rest of his natural life. There is no settlement." "Oh, I think there is," Pendleton said. He placed his briefcase on the console and clicked the latches open. He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. He turned it toward me. "Recognize this?" he asked. I looked at the image. My breath caught in my throat. It was a video file. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. It was filmed inside the master bedroom of our house in Scarsdale. It showed me. I was getting dressed. I was in my lingerie, unaware that a camera was recording. But it wasn't just me getting dressed. It was intimate. It was a moment of privacy, of vulnerability, shared with a husband I thought loved me. There were other files, too, thumbnails showing moments in bed, moments that were sacred to a marriage. "Julian was a paranoid man," Pendleton said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He installed hidden cameras in the bedroom, for security, of course, but he kept the footage." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the console to stay upright. "This is illegal," Vance growled. "This is revenge porn. It is a felony." "It is only a felony if he distributes it," Pendleton said with a shrug. "Right now, it is just evidence of, let us say, a complex marital dynamic. Or you can send Julian to prison, and 10 minutes later, everyone in New York, including your son's fraternity brothers, will see exactly what you look like without that expensive suit." I looked through the glass at Julian. He was looking at the mirror now. He couldn't see me, but he knew I was there. He knew his lawyer was delivering the message, and for the first time since his arrest. He stopped shaking. A small, cruel smirk touched his lips. He thought he had me. He thought that my shame was greater than my resolve. He thought that, like the old Alessandra, I would fold to protect my image, to keep the peace. He had forgotten who I was. I looked at the tablet. I looked at the image of my own body, weaponized against me by the man who had sworn to cherish it. I felt the tears prick my eyes, not tears of sadness, tears of fury. "You are despicable," I said to Pendleton. "I am a lawyer," he replied. "I represent my client's interests. You have 1 hour to decide. Mrs. Vale." After that, the files go to TMZ. Pendleton snapped his briefcase shut and walked out of the room, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and moral rot in his wake. Vance looked at me, his face pale. "Mrs. Vale, we can get an injunction. We can stop them." "An injunction takes days," I said, my voice hollow. "The internet takes seconds. Once it is out, it is out." "So what do we do?" Vance asked. "Do we deal?" I looked at Julian one last time. "He thinks shame is my weakness," I said softly. "He thinks I am still the girl who hid in the shadows because she was afraid of being seen." I turned to Vance. "Get the car," I said. "Where are we going?" "We are going to the press," I said. "He wants to show the world who I am." "Fine, I will show them, but I will do it on my terms." "You are not going to give in?" Vance asked, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "No," I said. "I am going to destroy him. And I am going to make sure that when he plays that card, it is the last thing he ever does." I walked out of the precinct. The morning sun was rising over the city. Burning off the fog, it was a new day, a hard day. But I was Alessandra Ethelgard, and I was done hiding. The drive back to the estate was the longest hour of my life. The threat Arthur Pendleton had delivered, the threat of exposing my most private, intimate moments to the world, sat in my gut like a stone. It was a violation so profound, so specifically designed to humiliate a woman, that it threatened to buckle my knees. For a brief, terrified moment. I considered it. I considered walking into the district attorney's office and lying. I considered telling them it was all a misunderstanding, just to keep those videos offline, just to save my children from the horror of seeing their mother exposed. But then I looked at Vance, who was driving with his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "If you fold now," Vance said quietly, not taking his eyes off the road, "he owns you, not just for today, forever. Every time you try to make a move, every time you try to rebuild, he will dangle that hard drive over your head." He was right. Negotiating with a terrorist only invites more terror. "Call the kids," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands. "Tell them to meet me in the library. I need to tell them everything." "Everything?" Vance asked. "Everything," I confirmed. "If Julian wants to use the truth as a weapon, I will disarm him by detonating it myself." When I walked into the library, Lucas and Emma were sitting on the leather sofa. They looked younger than their 19 years, huddled together. The trauma of the last few days etched into their faces. They stood up when I entered. "Mom," Emma said, rushing to hug me. "We saw the news. They arrested Marcus. Is it over?" I held her for a long moment, smelling her hair, drawing strength from her. "Lucas, no," I started. "You do not need to—" "I need to see him," Lucas interrupted, turning to face me. "I need to tell him what I think of him, and then I am done." I drove Lucas to the Metropolitan Detention Center myself. Emma stayed behind with Vance. She was not ready, and I would not force her. The visitation room was sterile and cold, divided by thick plexiglass. I stood by the door, watching as my son sat down on the metal stool. Julian was brought in. He looked better than he had at the precinct. He had showered, and he was wearing an orange jumpsuit. When he saw Lucas, his face lit up with a pathetic, eager hope. "Luke," Julian said, picking up the phone receiver. "Oh, thank God. You came. Son, you have to help me. Your mother is out of control. She is trying to ruin me." Lucas picked up the receiver. He did not smile. He did not say hello. "Mom told me about the videos," Lucas said. Julian's smile faltered. He licked his lips, glancing nervously at me standing in the back. "Son, that is complicated. It is just leverage, a business tactic. I would never actually—" "You filmed my mother in her bedroom," Lucas said, his voice flat. "You violated her, and now you are threatening to humiliate her to save your own skin." "I am desperate. Luke," Julian pleaded. "I am facing 20 years. I am your father. Does that mean nothing to you?" "It means everything," Lucas said. It means I know exactly what kind of man I never want to be. Lucas leaned forward, his forehead touching the glass. You are not my father, Lucas whispered. You are just a predator I lived with. If you release those videos, I will never speak to you again. If you don't release them, I will still never speak to you again. You are dead to me. Lucas hung up the phone. He stood up and walked toward me. He did not look back. Behind the glass, Julian was screaming, slamming his fist against the partition, mouthing the word, son, over and over again. Lucas walked past me and out the door. I followed him. Do what you have to do, Mom, Lucas said as we walked to the car. Burn him. That was the permission I needed. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, the grand ballroom of the Eiffelgard Tower was packed. Every major news network was there. The flashbulbs were blinding. I stood backstage, adjusting the microphone pack on my waist. I was wearing white, not a suit, but a dress, a sharp, architectural white dress that looked like armor. Vance walked up to me. He held a piece of paper in his hand. His face was grim but triumphant. We found it, Vance said. The forensic team went through the cloud backups from Julian's laptop. We found the metadata for the videos. And we found something else, Vance said. He kept a digital diary, notes, dates. Vance handed me the paper. Cross-reference these dates with your medical records, Vance said. Specifically, the days you had those migraines where you slept for 14 hours. I looked at the list. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept through my body. October 4th, 2 milligrams. She is out cold. Met Lydia at the hotel. November 12th, 3 milligrams. She almost woke up. Need to increase the dose. My knees almost gave out. He hadn't just filmed me. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had drugged me. Those nights I thought I was sick. Those mornings I woke up groggy, unable to remember putting the kids to bed. He had been slipping sedatives into my tea. He had chemically incapacitated me so he could go out and sleep with his partner's wife. It was assault, pure and simple. I felt a fire ignite in my chest. It was not the cold anger of the last few days. It was a white-hot supernova of rage. Thank you, Vance, I said. I folded the paper and held it in my hand. Are you ready? Vance asked. I was born ready. I walked out onto the stage. The noise was deafening. I stood at the podium and waited. I did not raise my hand for silence. I simply waited until my presence forced the room to quiet down. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice amplified across the world. Yesterday, my husband's lawyer informed me that unless I drop all criminal charges against Julian Thorne, explicit private videos of me filmed without my consent will be released to the public. A gasp went through the room. The reporters started typing furiously. This is called revenge porn, I continued. It is a weapon designed to silence women through shame. It relies on the archaic idea that a woman's body is a source of dishonor, and that exposing it destroys her credibility. I looked directly into the camera. I knew Julian was watching from his cell. I knew Pendleton was watching from his office. I am here to tell you that I do not negotiate with terrorists, I said. And I am here to tell Julian Thorne that he has miscalculated. I took a step closer to the cameras. You think you can shame me? I asked, my voice rising. You think that by showing the world my body, you can strip me of my power. You are wrong. The shame does not belong to the victim. The shame belongs to the traitor who held the camera. It belongs to the man who violated the trust of his marriage bed. I held up the paper Vance had given me. But this morning, I discovered that the invasion of privacy went far deeper than a camera lens. I said. The room went dead silent. My security team has recovered Julian Thorne's personal logs, I said. These logs confirm that for the past 3 years, Julian has been systematically dosing my evening tea with high-grade sedatives. The shock in the room was palpable, a collective intake of breath. He drugged me, I said, letting the words hang there. He rendered me unconscious, so that he could leave our home to commit adultery and corporate espionage. He risked my life, my health, and the safety of our children, who were sleeping down the hall while their mother was chemically induced into a coma and their father was absent. I slammed the paper down on the podium. "This is not just a white-collar crime," I declared. "This is domestic abuse. This is assault, and I am adding these charges to the indictment effective immediately." I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every reporter. "So, go ahead, Julian," I said. "Release the videos. Let the world see. Because all they will see is a woman who survived a monster. And when they look at you, they will see nothing but a coward." I turned and walked off the stage. I did not take questions. I did not need to. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. Within 10 minutes, the hashtag I Stand With Alessandra was trending globally. But it wasn't just a hashtag, it was a movement. Women all over the world began sharing their stories of blackmail and coercion. I had inadvertently lit a match in a room full of gasoline. The stock market reacted instantly. Ethelgard Holdings did not crash. It soared. Investors saw strength. They saw a leader who could not be bullied. They saw a woman who would protect her company with the same ferocity she protected her dignity. By noon, the stock was up 12%, but the most satisfying news came at 1 o'clock. I was sitting in my office when my assistant patched a call through. It was Arthur Pendleton. "Mrs. Vale?" he said. His voice was no longer smooth. It was strained and panicked. "Mr. Pendleton," I said. "Are you calling to tell me the videos are online?" "No," he said quickly. "No, absolutely not. I am calling to inform you that as of 10 minutes ago, I have formally withdrawn as counsel for Mr. Thorne." "Oh," I asked, swirling my tea that I had made myself. "Why is that?" "The drugging allegation," Pendleton said. "He didn't tell me about that. I cannot represent a client who withheld material evidence of a violent felony. It is a violation of my firm's ethics charter." "You mean it is bad PR," I corrected him. "I have destroyed the files," Pendleton said. "The drives are wiped. You have my word. I want nothing to do with this. Good day, Mrs. Vale." He hung up. I set the phone down. Julian was alone. He had lost his lawyer. He had lost his children. He had lost his leverage. The nuclear option had blown up in his face, leaving him exposed as not just a thief, but a predator. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The war was over. I had won every battle. I had dismantled his lies, stripped away his assets, and now I had taken his voice. But there was one last thing to do, a courtroom formality, the final act of the play, and I intended to enjoy every second of it. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a scent I had become intimately familiar with over the last 3 months. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my spine pressed against the hard wooden bench. I was wearing a navy blue suit, severe and impeccably tailored, with a single strand of pearls around my neck. To the press sketching furiously in the back rows, I looked like the grieving widow of a marriage that had died a violent death. To the jury, I looked like the only person in the room who had nothing to hide. At the defense table, Julian sat hunched over. 3 months of pretrial confinement had ravaged him. The man who had once spent an hour every morning sculpting his hair and moisturizing his skin was gone. In his place sat a ghost. His hair was thinning and gray at the temples, his skin sallow from the lack of sunlight and the abundance of prison food. He looked 10 years older. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were hollow, rimmed with the dark circles of a man who sleeps with one eye open. He looked away quickly. He could not bear the weight of my gaze. The trial was reaching its crescendo. The prosecution had spent 2 weeks dismantling the intricate web of lies Julian and Marcus had spun. They had walked the jury through the shell companies, the offshore accounts, and the forged loan documents, but today was the day the emotional knife would be twisted. Marcus Sterling was on the stand. He had cut a deal. Of course he had. Marcus was a survivor, a cockroach in a $3,000 suit. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he had agreed to testify against Julian. Mr. Sterling, the prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Wallace, asked, "Who initiated the plan to steal the Lazarus data?" Marcus adjusted his glasses. He looked calm, almost bored. "It was Mr. Thorne, Julian." "Liar," Julian hissed from the defense table. His court-appointed lawyer put a hand on his arm to silence him. "Please describe the nature of Mr. Thorne's motivation," Wallace said, ignoring the outburst. "He was obsessed," Marcus said, turning to address the jury directly. He felt emasculated by his wife's family legacy. Even though he didn't know the extent of it at the time, he wanted to build his own empire. He came to me with the plan. He said he had a buyer in Shanghai. He begged me to help him set up the logistics. I foolishly agreed, thinking I could temper his impulses, but Julian was out of control. I watched Julian's face turn a deep, bruised purple. It was a lie. Of course, Marcus had been the architect, but Julian was the one who had executed the physical theft. Julian was the one caught holding the drive, and in a conspiracy, the man holding the bag is the man who takes the fall. "He is lying," Julian shouted, standing up. "He is the one who set up Phoenix Corp. He is the one who introduced me to the buyers." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," the judge warned, banging his gavel. "One more outburst and I will have you gagged." Julian sank back into his chair, trembling. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes. He wanted me to save him. He wanted me to tell the truth that Marcus was the devil, but he forgot that he was a demon too. The prosecution called their next witness. "The people call Sarah Miller." Julian's secretary walked in. She looked young and terrified. She avoided looking at Julian as she took the oath. "Ms. Miller," Wallace asked, "did Mr. Thorne ever discuss his wife with you?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "What did he say?" "He said," she took a shaky breath. "He said she was a placeholder. He called her the anchor. He said he was only staying with her until his big deal went through. He used to laugh about how simple she was. He would read her text messages out loud in the office and mock her spelling." I kept my face impassive, though inside, a cold fury burned. I remembered those texts, messages asking if he wanted pot roast for dinner, messages telling him the kids missed him. He had read them to his mistress for a laugh. "And did you have a physical relationship with Mr. Thorne?" "Yes," Sarah said, starting to cry. "He told me he was leaving her. He promised me we would move to Brazil." Julian put his head in his hands. The jury looked at him with unmasked disgust. Infidelity is one thing. Mocking a loyal wife to a mistress is another. It painted a picture of a man devoid of character. But the final nail in the coffin came from the forensic evidence. Wallace called Dr. Aris, the lead chemist from Ethelgard's R&D division. "Dr. Aris," Wallace said, holding up an evidence bag containing the silver hard drive recovered at the shipyard. "Have you analyzed the data on this drive?" "I have," the doctor said. "And is it the formula for Project Lazarus?" "No, doctor," Aris said. Julian's head snapped up. He looked confused. "Please explain." "The file structure is identical." "Doctor," Aris said, "but the molecular compound described in these files is not an immunotherapy agent. It is a formula for a saline solution mixed with a reactive dye that turns bright blue when exposed to oxygen. It is completely useless medically." The courtroom murmured. "So," Wallace said, smiling slightly, "Mr. Thorne stole a recipe for blue salt water." "Essentially, yes." "And did he know this?" "Clearly not, doctor," Aris said, "or he would not have tried to sell it for $2 billion. Wallace turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is not only a thief, he is an incompetent one. He betrayed his family, his company, and his country for a placebo." Julian looked at me. His mouth hung open. He finally understood. I had played him. I had known about the theft before it even happened. I had let him walk into the trap carrying a bag full of nothing. When the defense presented their case, it was pathetic. Julian insisted on taking the stand against his lawyer's advice. He thought he could charm the jury. He thought he could explain it away. I was under so much pressure, Julian sobbed, gripping the railing of the witness box. You do not understand what it is like to be a man in this world. You have to provide. You have to be a winner. I felt like I was drowning. Alessandra. She didn't help. She was so content with being mediocre. I wanted more for us. I did it for my family. You stole your children's college funds for your family, Wallace asked on cross-examination. I was going to pay it back. You drugged your wife for your family. I just needed her to sleep. She was asking too many questions. No further questions. Then, it was my turn. The prosecution calls Alessandra Vale. I walked to the stand. The click of my heels was the only sound in the room. I took the oath. I sat down and smoothed my skirt. Mrs. Vale, Wallace asked gently, why didn't you tell your husband about your wealth? Why did you hide your identity? I looked at Julian. I looked him dead in the eye. Because I wanted to be loved, I said clearly. I grew up in a world where everyone wanted something from me, I continued, my voice steady. My name was a currency. My friendship was a transaction. When I met Julian, I thought I had found the one person who didn't care about the Ethelgard fortune. I thought he loved Ali, the painter, not Alessandra, the heiress. And did he? No, I said. He despised Ali. He resented her simplicity. He mocked her contentment. I leaned forward slightly. You see, Julian didn't love me. He didn't even like me. He loved the way I made him feel big. He loved his own reflection in the mirror of my submission. And the moment I stopped reflecting what he wanted to see, the moment I showed a spine, he tried to destroy me. I loved you, Julian shouted from the table. I loved you, Ali. You loved a ghost. Julian, I said. And now, you are the one who is going to disappear. I stepped down. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. It was a record speed for a case of this magnitude. When they returned, the foreman stood up. We find the defendant, Julian Thorne, guilty on all counts: grand larceny, corporate espionage, wire fraud, identity theft, and domestic assault. Julian closed his eyes. He did not cry. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The judge set the sentencing hearing, but before he could dismiss the court, there was a commotion at the back of the room. Your Honor, Wallace said, we have one final matter regarding the conspiracy charge. A witness who was unavailable until today. The doors opened. A woman walked in. She was beautiful, dressed in a sharp black suit. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. It was Lydia Sterling, Marcus's wife. The woman Julian had been sleeping with for 2 years. The woman who had been his confidant, his partner in crime, his escape plan. Julian's eyes lit up. He stood up, reaching out toward her. Lydia, he breathed. Lydia, tell them Marcus forced us. We can still fight this. He thought she was there to save him. He thought their love was real. Lydia walked past the defense table. She did not look at Julian. She walked straight to the prosecution table and nodded at me. Hello, Alessandra, Lydia said. Hello, Lydia, I replied. Thank you for coming. Julian froze. He looked between us, his brain trying to compute the impossible geometry of what he was seeing. What? Julian whispered. You know each other. Lydia turned to him. Her face was cold, stripped of the warmth she had faked for 2 years. Sit down, Julian, Lydia said. Lydia, what is going on? Julian pleaded. We are partners. We were going to run away together. We were never partners, Lydia said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. I am an employee of Ethelgard Security Services. My client is Mrs. Vale. The air left the room. What? Julian gasped. 2 years ago, I said, standing up slowly. I started to suspect that you were not who you said you were. I saw the way you looked at Marcus's wife at the Christmas party. I saw the hunger in your eyes. So, I decided to test you. I hired Lydia, I continued. She isn't Marcus's wife. She never was. Marcus is gay. Julian, everyone in the industry knows that except you. Lydia is a forensic accountant and a private operative. I placed her in your path to see what you would do. No, Julian whimpered. No, that is not true. We made love. We planned a life. You planned a heist, Lydia corrected him. And I recorded every single conversation, every text, every meeting. Who do you think gave the FBI the location of the warehouse? Who do you think gave Mrs. Julian pointed a shaking finger at me. You are a monster. No, Julian, I said softly. I am just a CEO protecting her assets. And you were a bad investment. Julian stared at me for 1 second longer. Then, he threw his head back and screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound, the sound of a man who realizes he is not the hero of his own story, but the villain in someone else's. He lunged toward me. His hands clawed into talons. I will kill you, he shrieked. 2 federal marshals tackled him before he got within 10 feet of me. They slammed him into the floor. He thrashed and howled, spitting curses, dragging his nails across the wood. Get him out of here, the judge roared. They dragged him away. He was still screaming my name as the heavy oak doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off the noise. The silence returned to the courtroom. I looked at Lydia. She gave me a small professional nod. Invoice is in the mail, she said softly. Paid in full, I replied. I picked up my purse. I walked down the center aisle, past the stunned reporters, past the sketching artists. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the bright, blinding sunlight of a New York afternoon. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. The gavel struck the mahogany-sounding block with a finality that echoed through the federal courtroom. It was a sharp, wooden crack that severed the last tether binding me to the past. The Honorable Judge Reynolds did not look up as he read the sentence. He sentenced Julian Thorne to 15 years in a federal penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Marcus Sterling. Due to his cooperation, however, Forsted had been received 12 years. I sat in the gallery, my hands folded in my lap. I did not feel joy. I did not feel the rush of adrenaline that usually accompanies a victory. I felt a profound, quiet stillness. It was the feeling of a storm finally breaking, leaving the air scrubbed clean and the world silent. The asset forfeiture hearing was swift. The court ordered the liquidation of every single asset Julian had hidden. The offshore accounts were drained. The crypto wallets were seized. The Porsche he loved more than his children was auctioned off to pay for his legal fees. He was left with nothing when the bailiffs led him away. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, a man hollowed out by his own greed. 2 weeks later, I stood in the judge's chambers for a different reason. The divorce decree lay on the desk. It was a stack of paper an inch thick, detailing the dissolution of a decade-long lie. But the document that mattered most to me was the one sitting next to it. Are you sure about this? The judge asked, looking over his spectacles at the 2 young adults standing beside me. Lucas stepped forward. He wore a suit that fit him properly, his shoulders squared. We are sure, Your Honor. We do not want the name Thorne, Emma added, her voice strong. It belongs to a stranger. We want to be Ethelgards. I looked at my children. They had borne the brunt of this war. They had seen their father exposed as a thief and a fraud. They had every right to be broken, but they were not broken. They were tempered steel. The judge signed the order. Alessandra Ethelgard, Lucas Ethelgard, Emma Ethelgard. We walked out of the courthouse as a family, reclaiming the legacy that I had once tried so hard to hide. The next month was a bloodletting at Ethelgard Holdings. I did not govern from the shadows anymore. I took the corner office on the top floor, the one that Marcus had occupied. I removed his oversized desk and replaced it with a sleek glass table. I removed the pretentious art and filled the walls with maps of our global operations. Then, I cleaned house. I called a mandatory all-hands meeting in the auditorium. I stood on the stage, the same way I had at the gala, but this time, there was no disguise. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the sycophants who had laughed at Marcus's jokes. I saw the executives who had looked the other way when safety protocols were ignored. If you were part of the culture of arrogance, I told them, my voice amplified and clear. If you believed that profits mattered more than integrity, or if you ever, for 1 second, thought that kindness was a weakness, you have 1 hour to clear your desk. Security escorted 42 executives out of the building that afternoon. I promoted the quiet ones, the workers who stayed late, the engineers who actually understood the science. I promoted Patricia, my grandfather's assistant, to vice president of operations. The stock price did not just recover, it stabilized and grew, built on a foundation of transparency rather than hype. But the hardest part was not the boardroom, it was the house. I drove back to Scarsdale on a rainy Tuesday. The house was empty now. The foreclosure sign sat on the front lawn, a final indignity for Julian, who had leveraged it to the hilt. I had bought the debt from the bank just so I could be the one to decide its fate. I unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and old memories. I walked through the living room where I had hosted dinner parties for people who secretly despised me. I walked into the kitchen where I had made thousands of meals for a man who was usually late. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. The bed was gone. The cameras Julian had hidden were gone, stripped out by the FBI. All that remained were the outlines of furniture on the carpet. I opened the closet. In the back, tucked away on a high shelf, was a box I had missed during the initial packing. I pulled it down. It was filled with photo albums. Our wedding, the twins' first birthday, a vacation to Cabo where I thought we were happy. I took the box to the backyard. I placed it in the stone fire pit. I struck a match. I watched the flame catch the edge of a photograph. It was a picture of Julian and me cutting our wedding cake. The fire curled the paper, turning his smiling face into black ash. I did not feel sad. I felt lighter. I was burning a script for a play that had been canceled. I went back inside and stood in front of the full-length mirror in the hallway. For 10 years, I had looked into mirrors and tried to see what Julian wanted. I had looked for flaws. I had looked for ways to make myself smaller, softer, quieter. I had practiced the art of being useless so that he could feel useful. I looked at the woman in the reflection now. She was 42 years old. She had fine lines around her eyes from laughter and from stress. She wore a suit that cost $5,000. She stood with her chin high, her shoulders back. "Goodbye, Ali," I whispered to the reflection. "You were a good shield. But I do not need a shield anymore." I turned and walked out of the house. I left the front door unlocked. I didn't care who went in. It wasn't my home. It was just a house where a stranger had lived. 6 months into his sentence, Julian requested a visitation. I declined the first 3 times. But the 4th time, curiosity got the better of me. Or perhaps it was the need for one final period at the end of the sentence. The federal prison was a gray, concrete monolith in Pennsylvania. The air inside smelled of bleach and despair. I sat on the metal stool in the visitation room. When Julian walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost 30 pounds. His head was shaved. The arrogance that had defined his posture was gone, replaced by a nervous shuffle. He sat down opposite me. The glass partition was thick, scratched by the wedding rings of 1,000 other heartbroken visitors. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "You look good," he said. His voice was raspy. "I am good," I replied. He looked down at his hands. "I heard about the company. The stock is at an all-time high. Competence is profitable. Julian," he nodded slowly. He didn't ask about the kids. He knew better. He knew that door was welded shut. "I have had a lot of time to think," he said. Looking up at me, his eyes were wet. About everything, about how I messed up. You did not mess up. Julian, I said. You made choices, thousands of them, every single day. I know, he whispered, but there is one thing I cannot figure out. One thing that keeps me awake at night. He leaned closer to the glass. When, he asked, when did you know? Was it the text messages? Was it the money? When did you decide to destroy me? I looked at him. I remembered the moment perfectly. It wasn't the infidelity. It wasn't the theft. It was something much smaller, much more painful. It was 3 years ago, I said. Our 10th anniversary. Julian frowned. I took you to dinner. At Le Bernardin. It was a great night. You were 45 minutes late, I said. You told me you were stuck in a board meeting. You came in, kissed me on the cheek, and ordered a bottle of wine. You spent the entire dinner checking your phone under the table. I was busy, he protested, weaky. You weren't in a meeting, Julian, I said. You were at the hotel bar across the street, having a drink with Marcus. You forgot the date. Marcus had to remind you. He told you to go buy your useless wife a steak to shut her up. Julian's face went pale. How could you possibly know that? Because, I said, leaning forward, my voice calm and deadly. While I was sitting alone at that table waiting for you, watching the candle burn down, I made a phone call. I smiled. I called my asset manager, and by the time you walked through the door and ordered the appetizers, I had bought the restaurant. Julian stared at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I owned the building, Julian. I owned the staff. I owned the maitre d' who seated you. I heard everything you said to Marcus at the bar because the bartender was on my payroll. I knew everything, and I let you pay for dinner with my money. The horror on his face was total. He realized then that he had never been in control, not for 1 second. He had been a mouse dancing in the palm of a lion, thinking he owned the jungle. Why, he whispered, why did you wait so long? Because I wanted to see how far you would go, I said, and because I wanted to make sure that when I finally crushed you, you would stay crushed. I hung up the phone. Alessandra, he shouted, slapping the glass. Alessandra, wait. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door. Behind me, I could hear him screaming my name, a muffled, desperate sound that grew fainter with every step. The guard opened the door. I stepped into the sunlight. Clang. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind me. It was the best sound I had ever heard. 1 year later, the gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Dender was bathed in soft, golden light. This time, I did not stand in the shadows. I wore a dress of liquid gold, a design that commanded attention not because of its flash, but because of its wearer. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the new leadership of Ethelgard Holdings, by senators, by artists, by the people who actually shaped the world. But the only people I cared about were sitting at the front table. Lucas looked handsome in his tuxedo. He was finishing his sophomore year, studying ethical business practices. Emma sat next to him, radiant in blue, already making a name for herself in the art world under her own merit. They looked at me with pride, not the fearful, confused look of the past, but the steady, grounded pride of children who know exactly who their mother is. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The applause was not polite. It was thunderous. It was genuine. I took the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I thought about the scared girl who had created Ali the painter to hide from her own power. I thought about the wife who had made herself small to fit into a husband's narrow world. They were both gone. Thank you, I said, and the room went silent instantly. A year ago, I stood on a stage like this, and I was introduced as a victim. I was introduced as a woman who had succeeded in spite of herself. I paused, catching Lucas's eye. He smiled. But tonight, I stand here as Alessandra Ethelgard, and I have learned a valuable lesson. I looked into the camera, knowing that somewhere, in a common room with a small television, Julian might be watching. They say success is the best revenge, I said, my voice ringing off the ancient stones of the temple. It is a nice sentiment. Success is powerful. Success is vindication. I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached my eyes. But I say, freedom is the sweetest thing. I raised my glass. To freedom! The crowd erupted, the music swelled, and as the golden confetti rained down around me, I finally, truly, began to live. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a wild journey from the Plaza Hotel to the federal courthouse, and I hope you enjoyed every twist and turn of Alessandra's revenge. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Are you in New York, London, Sydney, or somewhere else entirely? Let's get a conversation going in the comments section. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Scarlet Revenge Stories channel. Do not forget to hit that like button to support the channel, and please, press the hype button or share this video so more people can listen to this story. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring more of these dramas to life. Stay free and stay strong.